Hello, welcome to our latest Queen Elizabeth Scholarship presentation from the McMaster Health Forum at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'll provide you with a quick rundown of the McMaster Health Forum, the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Program, and the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Program here at the Forum. I will then turn it over to our scholar presenter who will talk about their experiences. The McMaster Health Forum aims to be the leading hub for improving health outcomes through collective problem solving. We harness information, convene stakeholders, and prepare action-oriented leaders to act as an agent of change by empowering stakeholders. The Canadian Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Scholarships, or QES for short, is managed through a unique partnership of Universities Canada, the Rita Hall Foundation, Community Foundations of Canada, and Canadian universities. This program is made possible with financial support from the Government of Canada, provincial governments, and the private sector. The purpose of the program is to activate a dynamic community of young global leaders to create lasting impacts both at home and abroad through cross-cultural exchanges encompassing international education, discovery and inquiry, and professional experiences. The McMaster Health Forum had a previous Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Program. We were very proud to have been selected as one of 20 Canadian institutions to host a second round of scholars. The new program ran from 2018 to the end of 2021, but was extended to the end of 2023. The focus of the McMaster Health Forum's current Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Program is strengthening health and social systems. Our scholars have contributed to strengthening health and social systems and have become part of our large and growing network of health and social system leaders. During our original Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Program, we hosted 14 incoming scholars, and we sent 3 outgoing scholars to work with our partners. We also had an additional 44 outgoing interns who traveled abroad to work with partners of the McMaster Health Forum. For our current Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Program on strengthening health and social systems, we have hosted 7 incoming scholars, and we have sent abroad 24 outgoing interns who have worked with our partners around the world. Our scholar presenter today is incoming scholar Rana, who's a PhD student in the Health Policy PhD program at McMaster, supervised by Dr. Julia Abelson. Rana has a Master in Public Health as well as a bachelor degree in Nutrition and Dietetics. Rana is interested in advancing the role of public engagement in health policy in developing countries, and her PhD work looks at the factors that influence the institutionalization of public engagement initiatives. Rana's aims for QES were to enrich her understanding of the factors that influence evidence-informed policymaking for a stronger impact on health and social systems. Rana, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in the discussion about my experience as a Queen Elizabeth Scholar in strengthening health and social systems as an incoming student to McMaster University. I will start with a brief introduction about myself and the rationale for choosing my research topic and my research interests in general, and then I will share some of my experience as an incoming scholar during the times of the pandemic. And then, of course, I will provide an overview about my research work ever since. So I'm a PhD candidate in the Health Policy program at McMaster. I'm currently in my 4th year. I also hold a Master's in Public Health from the American University of Beirut, where I've worked at the Knowledge to Policy Center, which is a sister center to the McMaster Health Forum, working primarily in knowledge translation. So my experience is largely in knowledge translation and capacity building for evidence-informed policymaking. I'm also an advocate for health and social policies. Throughout my career, I came to the realization that many of the policies that I was working with and was analyzing and studying were largely built based on the interests of policymakers and key stakeholders, rather than the values, interests, and priorities of citizens who are the primary beneficiaries of those policies. And this could be largely harmful, especially if there is a mismatch between the values of policymakers and the values of citizens. As such, I've decided to start engaging citizens and starting a program of citizen engagement there. However, that was still at its infancy, especially that the government was not holding any citizen engagement projects and was not working on integrating their feedback into the policymaking process. So I've realized that if I don't have a protected process that is integrated within policymaking processes, then we will always have inadequate and not largely responsive policies. What further solidified my interest in participatory decision making was the revolution that erupted in Lebanon in 2019. And being there on the streets every single day and holding a lot of circles for discussion with the people on the streets revolting, there was a primary consensus and a very recurrent theme that people want to be involved in the decisions affecting their health, their well-being, their social life, and even their political life. See, in Lebanon, the constitution provides the citizens this right. However, governments are not practicing that engagement at all. Not only in Lebanon, but also in the larger region, in the Arab region, there's a huge need for public engagement in the decision making process, especially that the region is really inflicted with constant political turmoil, armed conflicts, constant forced migration, and a lot of social and health and development challenges. So, why public engagement? Largely because it's a human right. And there's a lot of declarations, conventions, treaties, and national and international policies that support that right to be realized. However, the implementation of it is largely inadequate. And if we have really any chance to reach the SDGs by 2030, we really need to work on systems that are responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative of all stakeholders, including citizens and primarily citizens. When it comes to health policy and decision making, it is especially important because there is a huge benefit for the systems, the organizations that are involving the public, and the public themselves. The evidence suggests that actually public engagement leads to the development of a health system that is responsive to their needs and priorities and expectations. It also leads to better policy implementation, compliance, reaching better services, and of course, improved health outcomes overall. But also, very importantly, it provides the public with the agency to, to hold their policymakers accountable, to ask for transparency, and to be advocates for their own policymaking processes. And another very important benefit, but largely not discussed, is that public engagement increases the trust and the confidence of the citizens in the healthcare system. And this is one of the very important determinants in improving and reaching for the proper health reform we are looking for in different contexts. Take a step back and look at the larger contexts in the global context, even in big democracies, you will see a huge mismatch between the interests and the values of the public and then the outcome policies that are provided and put forward by policymakers. So that would make you think of ways to make sure that this process is protected. It's a protected right, it's a protected process. We know that it will happen, and we know that this feedback that we're getting from citizens is actually being used in the policymaking process. That's where the concept of institutionalizing public engagement in health policy and decision making becomes really important to study. At the contexts where they have already implemented such examples of institutionalizing public engagement around the world, you will see few countries, especially within the EU, within the US, Canada, Australia, and the OECD in general. But Canada remains a prominent example because they have institutionalized public engagement a long time ago in different levels of government and across different levels of decision making. The stars aligned, and I became an incoming scholar in Canada to study this phenomena furthermore. However, my experience was largely shaped by the COVID pandemic, and it wasn't at all like anything I've expected or signed up for. I arrived in Canada in December 2020 and experienced the Canadian winter firsthand. Coming from a Mediterranean climate, I wouldn't say that it went as a breeze. However, I found solace in my winter walks in the snow. It was very soothing and exciting. At that time, the lockdown measures were extreme, and everything went remote for a long time. Canadian institutions were still figuring out how to navigate regular work during the pandemic. And that has really disadvantaged the staff, disadvantaged the programs that they're working on, and also disadvantaged students, especially international students. Personally, I reached and found new heights of personal resilience within myself, trying to figure out a new country in a new complex system in a complete lockdown and while struggling with long COVID myself. However, I immersed myself in trying to understand the policy making processes in Canada. And I found myself struggling a bit there. And upon a lot of self reflections, I came to the realization over and over again that really immersive experiences are very, very important in understanding the culture and the values of the Canadian system as a very important determinant in understanding the policy making system. However, I cannot be except grateful that I had plenty of protected time to work on my research that proved to be extremely time consuming and required a lot of looking into the depth of the literature to understand. While diving into the research and the literature, I realized that the institutionalization of public engagement has its foundations in different disciplines. You could find it in the literature on health policy theories, public administration literature, public policy, political science, and social science. But most prominently, probably would be the democratic theory. Democratic theory is actually very important in this context as it really calls for participatory and deliberative democracy as a way to support the representative democratic processes. And really, within the past 20 years or so, that work on participatory and deliberative democracy has been booming in a lot of country and contexts and trying to figure it out more and understand it better. One of the key outcomes for democratic theory and the participatory democracy was to reach institutional empowerment that includes opportunities for citizens to engage in inclusive, equitable, transparent procedures and institutions that will eventually lead to legitimate and just policies. And that part there resonated a lot with the work on institutionalizing public engagement. You'd think I'd be lucky that multiple disciplines were all discussing institutionalizing public engagement. However, all of those disciplines were exploring similar concepts, yet with fragmentation, duplication, contradictions, overlap, and the lines were very blurry across and in between those disciplines. So, a lot of my time was spent in trying to piece the pieces of the puzzle together and trying to understand the similarities and differences in the concepts between different disciplines and what can apply to the arena of health policy and decision making. My research took a lot of twists and turns before I could finally narrow down the key issues that need to be understood so that we could apply those examples of institutionalizing public engagement in health policy and decision making in different contexts and to understand it under different lens and different political systems and different contextual variables. So finally, my work at Glance was based on answering three main questions: the what, why, and the how questions. So, at first, I wanted to understand what is institutionalization? What are the definitions? What are the conceptualizations of it? So, what I did is that I worked on a critical interpretive synthesis study to provide an organizational framework and working definitions of this concept. My next steps included understanding why and how governments decide to institutionalize public engagement. And that was through studying and analyzing comparative case studies of contexts that have already applied that institutionalization and trying to understand what happened there. So, for the first question, the why, I was interested in understanding the factors that have led the governments to finally decide that they want to institutionalize public engagement. They saw the importance of it, they saw the outcomes of it, and they decided also that they want to institutionalize it and make it as part of their regular work. That is also important in understanding how to convince the next government into adopting institutionalization agenda. The next part of my work was also focusing on how governments would be able to do it. So I was really zoning in on the different structures, processes, the legal and regulatory frameworks used, the practices needed, the expertise needed, the resources that are needed to do that, and do it effectively so that it wouldn't be just a facade for policymakers to hide behind, as we see in many different contexts. All of this work hopefully will together answer one main aspect of what is institutionalization and how can we apply it in different contexts. My contribution to the bigger puzzle would be through adding few missing pieces in understanding what is institutionalization of public engagement in health policy specifically. My work will hopefully produce a general framework that will help us understand this better, understand the forms that it takes, and how and why governments decide to do it. My work will also hopefully lead to the understanding of the different structures and processes and legal and regulatory frameworks that are important to reach to that level. And I'm hoping that this work will eventually become a standard new approach on how to describe, advance, and possibly later on in the future, test institutionalization of public engagement. And going back to my primary rationale, my work will hopefully lead to a better understanding of what institutionalization is, all of its variables and all of its important factors, before we can be able to contextualize this knowledge to the low middle income countries, to the Arab region, to different contexts with different political systems and different contextual variables. Hopefully, that will lead to the advancement of the institutionalization of public engagement agenda there. Thank you so much for tuning in all of this time to hear my experience. I will be happy to answer any questions with my contact information on the slide there. Thank you so much.